disappointing that under the threat of one of its key members leaving, the sorts of things that we got reformed were very, very mild changes to child benefit and, tapered in changes to things like tax credits. How as a nation have we been reduced to taking the begging bowl around 27 different countries of Europe, asking whether we can make minor changes to welfare policy? It just seemed to me a ludicrous facade. And the truth is, most people that have looked at this objectively have said that even that deal, even that measly deal that we've actually got done, isn't actually legally binding, could be struck down by the European Parliament straight after this referendum. So for me, there was nothing really in the deal that should alter the way that individuals should vote in this referendum. I look at the big fundamentals because there really was nothing in that reform package that actually fundamentally changes our relationship.
Yeah, I think some of this misses the way the EU works. We talk about the Council, the European Council's the true power still, the states. The Commission is one state, in effect, in addition to that. But the states are the centre of power. And it's not 28 equal states. There are some states that are more equal than others. And so often business is done on the margins of reform between, say, Britain, France and Germany, often, increasingly Britain and Germany. What's sad about the last couple of years is the extent to which I've seen a very good British diplomatic machine in Brussels has been paralysed. And we've been unable to kind of work the kind of day-to-day deals, because the reality of the EU is actually not these big declarations. It's day after day of constant negotiations, of doing deals, of fixing deals. And we've been very good at that. So we might get outvoted on certain occasions. But when you look at the totality of British influence, and speak to most ministers, 9 times out of 10, probably more, they get what they want.
But that's, sorry, could I just come back on that? But that's the whole problem here, and this is the anti-democratic nature. When you vote for a government, or when you vote for a party at an election that you want to be the government, they have a manifesto and they stand on that. And quite often in our system, a government gets elected as a majority, and you know what they've promised you, and you know what they're going to deliver. We're electing a government who's then going to the European Council, and all of these deals are being done that actually nobody has voted for. That's the anti-democratic nature of this institution.
But that's international relations. Sorry, I haven't come back on that, because that's how international relations work. You elect a government, it goes to NATO or the UN or the EU, and if it's good, it does effective deal-making on your behalf, because you elected them to do that. That happens in every institution in the world.
But Julian, the point that we're making, which your side just don't accept, is the number now of competencies that we have ceded to Brussels. I mean, only this year they're now consulting on the European Pillar of Social Rights, which is going to cover minimum pay, minimum measures to ensure rights and access to justice, lifelong learning skills, access to social care and healthcare. What we're saying is we should be doing those things in our own parliament. People like Phillip, who we elect and can go and see and badger at executive council meetings, these are our politicians here should be doing these things. We're not saying we don't want to do these things, but we should be doing them here. But on the question of Cameron's deal, I was very, very disappointed with the outcome of the negotiations. I wasn't sure how I was going to vote in this referendum, because I was hoping very much that the Prime Minister would come back with the reforms that he was talking about in his Bloomberg speech, particularly doing something about the European Court of Justice, repatriating powers, particularly in relation to the Working Time Directive, and all the rest of it. But the reality is we didn't get any of that, and the only 2 little things that we got, the 2 little tweaks to the benefit payments, the child benefit going to countries after 2020 according to the amount of benefit to be paid in that country, whereas the Prime Minister said he would stop that completely, and the access to in-work benefits, which he was going to stop, now being on a taper for 4 years. The European Court of Justice will almost certainly overturn those in any event, because they will say that they are discriminatory. So there is effectively hardly any reform, and given the Prime Minister said this was going to be a vote on not whether we leave or remain, but whether we leave or remain in a reformed EU, I'm fully expecting the Prime Minister will be voting to leave.
Fine. Look, I agree, Anna. Cameron still doesn't transform the nature of the EU. If you hold a gun to somebody's head and say, give us what we want and we're leaving it, isn't necessarily the most effective diplomatic.
Worked in Scotland.
But you're wrong on one thing, Anna. You said it wouldn't get through the European Parliament or the European Court of Justice. The European Parliament, the leaders of the Parliament said they will pass Cameron's deal, and I have reason to believe that the ECJ said in private it will too. It doesn't go against them.
No, Charles, I'm not dealing with the point about whether it's legally binding. It isn't, but it nonetheless might become legally binding in due course.
Okay.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying the actual reforms that he's negotiated in relation to benefits will not get through the ECJ. There will be a challenge from the Polish.
Yes, and I'm telling you that the ECJ has said in private it will pass them because it doesn't like to go against the European Council. But I can't prove that, like I said. Now, my main point is a very short sentence. You said we've given so many competences to you. Well, have we? Hang on, just think for a second. Any new EU treaty to change the rules, unanimity, national veto. Any enlargement like letting in Turkey or Serbia, national veto. All foreign policy, national veto. All defence policy, national veto. All tax policy, national veto. And as for the key issues like health, education, welfare, these are, with a very few exceptions, there's no EU competence. I totally reject the idea we've given lots of powers to you.
But Charles, what you haven't talked about...
We need to move on. Next question. Gentleman. Sorry.
Oh, good evening. My name is Jim Macy. I'm a little bit curious about the European Union because I'm not quite clear what kind of organisation it is. And I'm looking around the world and I'm asking myself, the South Americans, the North Americans, the Asians, have any of them now or in the recent past had a similar organisation? Can we make an analogy between the EU and another similar organisation sort of halfway between economic and political somewhere else on a different continent? And if such an organisation doesn't exist, is there a good reason why Europe needs to be differently organised and governed?
Yeah, when you could look at organisations like NAFTA, there's a thing called the Eurasian Union that is basically a Russian attempt at a Russian empire. And there's nothing quite like the European Union. Why? Because all the other organisations tend to have what we say in academia is a hegemonic power at the centre, one big power that dominates it, and that you create an institution in the sense to legitimise that power. The point about the EU, it is genuinely a group of equal powers, or fairly equal powers, some smaller powers, and it's organised on the principle of a balance of power in Europe that's so enshrined in law and rules that it can't break out into what will become a dangerous competition as we saw in the 19th and 20th centuries. So you're right, there's not anything that I would say is like the EU, but writing the current book I'm writing, we're seeing organisations like the African Union, even the Arab League, now beginning to talk in the same way about developing models which are similar to the EU, where there would be an agreed level of pooled sovereignty, an element of supranationality, to use the appalling slogans, and a mainly intergovernmental power. So in regions where there is conflict, the EU is being held up as a potential model. And for that reason, in many ways, it's in the lead. Right?
Well, unlike many other of my Leave companions, I don't actually oppose the European Union's existence. I just don't want Britain to be in it. I think that there is a role for political union of states for historic reasons on continental Europe, and also as a bulwark against potential Russian aggression as well. And clearly, amongst many European states who now share a single currency, there is a need for a degree of political and fiscal and economic union in order to make that work. And if countries want to do that, and the electorates want to do that, then good luck to them. But I think this is almost a completely distinct question from whether Britain should decide to remain within.
Thank you. My name is Michael Weatherall. I have one question for Anne and another for the panel. Could you ask the audience who is the head of public service in the UK? Also for everybody, who did you vote for in the House of Lords in the last election?
Who wants to go first?
Yeah,
That's a brilliant question.
we wanted to ask the audience.
Who is the head of civil service in the UK?
Cabinet Secretary.
Who is the head of the civil service, the cabinet secretary in the UK? I happen to know who this is, but does anyone else know that?
But the
Yeah, but
the European Commission isn't a civil
No,
service.
exactly.
Sorry, the reason why I asked that question is because our elected government elect or appointed the commission.
Yes,
There is democracy.
no, I take your point, it is a form of democracy, but you cannot possibly say that the European Union is the same form of democracy that we have in this country. You're absolutely right that all of the commissioners are appointed by the head of state, by David Cameron in our case, but prime ministers also appoint generals. They also appoint vice-chancellors of universities. They also appoint heads of quangos. The question is, do we want generals or bishops? Do we want bishops and generals and vice-chancellors initiating our laws? I mean, I personally don't. But so you can't. And the second point, your second point, it is the only body, the Commission, that has the power to initiate legislation. Yes, the Council of Ministers is a co-legislator, and the European Parliament is a co-legislator, but it has to be proposed by the Commission. The House of Lords does not initiate legislation in our country. The House of Lords is a reviewing body, so they are not the same. Well, the Parliament Act, of course, in 1946 was brought in to stop the House of Lords from being able to block things permanently.
Charles.
Yeah, well, and I agree with that. I mean, the Commission is appointed by governments who are elected, but also by the Parliament, which is, I'm not a big fan of the European Parliament, but it is directly elected. It does have to approve the appointment of each Commissioner. The Commission plays a very important job in the EU. It is unique. There's no parallel in any other international structure in the world. The Eurasian Economic Union, the Commission there is a Commission, is run by the Russian government. This Commission is not run by any government. It makes mistakes, but it does see the general interest, what's good for Europe. So there wouldn't be a single market without the Commission to have proposed it. You can't trust the Germans or the British or the French to always see what's good for the EU as a whole. So it plays a very important innovatory role, saying let's have proposal on services liberalisation, which you would like, and then the member states and the Parliament can reject it or accept it. So the ultimate power relies on the member states and the Parliament. The other job it does is to police the market. This is what some of my sceptic friends don't get. If you want a single market and to make sure that the French allow in British firms of architects or British ski instructors or stop banning British beef exports, you need the Commission to come down on the French like a ton of bricks, as they did when they banned on beef. And they said, look, we'll fine you every day in the Court of Justice if you don't let in beef exports. And then the French let in beef exports. So you need that policing role by the Commission, and I'm all for that policing role.
It's more than a policing role, because you can have an internal market where you have a court overseeing if countries are trying to erect unfair protectionist measures, whether that be tariff or non-tariff barriers. What you do not need is complete regulatory harmonisation, which is the model, the ideological model of the European Commission. It's centralising and harmonising.
One more question.